Pokemon gets banned in Saudi Arabia. Electronic Arts shuts down Ultima Online 2. And Harry Potter mania comes to video games. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the podcast where we travel back in time 40, 30, or 20 years ago to see what was making headlines in the world of video games and home computing. I'm your host, Carl, and as always, here's my co-host, Peter. Say hi, Peter.
Hi.
Excellent. So, maybe before we can turn on the time machine and jump back 20 years to June of 2001, we need the obligatory banter section of the podcast. So, Peter, what's new with you?
What's new with me? Dude, I'm sore. I restarted working out this week and, well, jeez, my body just hurts. But it's actually a good pain, so no pain, no gain, you know. You know how it is, man.
It's been a long time since I went to the gym, I have to sadly admit. It's
Dude, for me the same. It's almost been a year for me, and I won't ask you how long it's been for you. But you're a father, so...
It's been a while. Let's just say it's been a while.
But
yeah.
you know, going there was actually... Well, I had to convince myself to enjoy it. Being there was like, okay, I'm here, and leaving it, I was like, good, really good that I did it. So, and it really helps me to relax after work. You wouldn't believe it, but you're so way more relaxed when you actually come from the gym. As I said, going there is a pain in the butt. Leaving it, awesome.
Dude, as somebody who used to have a very good ethic in these things, I completely and totally concur with you. And unfortunately, married life just kind of put the kibosh on that one, unfortunately. But I hope to return to it as soon as I'm going back and forth to classes in person, on site at the university again. Until then, however...
until then, you have a kid for the one arm and your wife for the other arm, and then I'll just say, go for it.
Yes, I will learn how to do serious lifting. That's not going to happen. Okay, so I think the obligatory banter section is now completed. We've done our obligations. We can get to the meat of the topic, namely... sending you on a trip to play one of the games that was reviewed in magazines in June of 2001 in a little segment we call 7 Minutes in Heaven. And the game that I chose for you to play was Serious Sam.
Yeah, baby!
Welcome back, Peter, from your 7 Minutes in Heaven, playing Serious Sam. Now, the first encounter, I should say. So, first off, for our listeners, describe Serious Sam based off of what you saw.
Based off what I saw, it's a Rambo-like game where you're equipped with different weapons, going through an ancient Egypt temple, shooting headless guys, one-eyed monsters, dinosaur skeletons, all the stuff roaming around and what you would expect in an ancient Egyptian temple. Yeah, you shoot that stuff, and this is basically it. And every once in a while, Serious Sam gives a nice comment like, you shoot this one-eyed guy, and he's like, it's all fun and games until someone loses an eye, with a deep, manly voice, which I do not have. And oh yeah, you have to be self-aware. And this is basically it. I mean, I want to give more input, I want to give more content, but this is basically it. This is the entire game. Well, at least the entire 7 to 10 minutes that I've played.
Okay. Yeah. And were you given some background story? And what is it? A side scroller? Is it a
okay. Sorry, because I just had it in front of my eyes. Well, it's a 3D first-person shooter with a huge backstory, like mankind is on the brink of annihilation in the future, and they send him back to the past to get 4 magic stones or something. I don't know. I didn't really pay attention to the story. It's a first-person shooter. There's no story. Well, BioShock, I'm sorry, but other than that.
Oh, well, There's plenty of first-person shooters with story. Remember, we also played No One Lives Forever a few months back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so considering that they're both coming out at around the same time in the same year, where would you place these two? Since you've played 2 FPSs now this year.
Where would I place these two?
Yeah, I mean, how would you compare them to one another?
Dude, considering that I cannot for the hell of it remember No One Lives Forever. I was really afraid you were going for this question, and you just went for it.
Yeah,
good. Good. No. I seriously have no recollection of No One Lives Forever for some reason. I mean, I can just quickly browse through my.
I'll send you the video.
Yeah, please send me the video.
We didn't video. That was before we were doing videos. That's why you can't remember. We didn't record that one. And it would have been funny because you kept dying over and over again. But now we're getting off topic. So.
Wait, is it the side scroller with where you have the soldier and? No, this is Metal Slug X.
That was Metal Slug.
Yeah. I mean, considering how many games I play for this podcast alone and all the games I play in my free time, and this girlfriend of mine is just imaginary, of course.
Okay.
You tend to lose track.
We get it. So now a little bit of history on this game. This was originally supposed to be a budget title developed by a small team in Eastern Europe. And it became a hugely popular game, mainly because the engine's ability to render large open spaces with tons and tons of enemies on the screen. Unfortunately, you didn't get to that point, really. I think the most you had on the screen was like 7 or 8.
Yeah, in the end, in the latter part of it, there were like 7 or maybe 10 enemies that were running straight towards me, and I had a shotgun. I killed them all because I'm freaking Rambo. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, your final assessment: good, bad,
boring.
Okay.
Yeah, well, at least the beginning. Maybe it gets way better later on. But this is the problem. I mean, I've played a newer version of Serious Sam quite a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago or something, and I felt the same. It was just boring. I mean, there were way more enemies. The graphics were way more modern, of course, but it was just, it's just shoot, and he gives a manly, funny comment every once in a while. Yeah. I mean, the game is made for someone, just not for me.
Very true. Okay, so one more stop before we turn on the time machine. We have to check in with our good friend Ethan for the Department of Corrections.
Welcome back, Ethan. So, hit us. What was the comment of the episode?
Oh, the comment. Oh, I like that's not a hit. That's just letting you know.
Okay.
So, I've done some unorthodox John comments before, but this time I'm falling into line with the Peter comment. And now for John this time, the John comment. I don't know why opera came to mind, but John, YouTube was not around in 2001. You were like, oh, YouTube started around this time, right? No, I was there. I've been on the internet like since the late 90s, so I know. You know, when I'll tell you. All right, here's my unorthodox story. When YouTube first came around, I did not want to view it. I avoided it. I don't know why. I don't know. It was just a thing. Like probably because my sister found it first, and I was like, I don't want to do what my sister's doing. So
almost makes me remember when I refused to use Google because I was an Alta Vista guy.
I'd ask Jeeves and all that. I was yeah, I was there. I'm not that young. All right, so we are on to the bureaucratic section of your fun video game podcast. All right, so
yes,
let's get the Department of Corrections out of the way. But first, we have a correction for me.
Oh no!
For the last 2001 episode, I was saying Vivendi got out 2016. It was 2013 that they actually get out. So that on my part. And we will run very quickly past it, so I don't have to acknowledge my mistakes again. All right. You were talking about Final Fantasy, and then you talked about Dragon Quest and said Dragon Quest has a consistent story?
Did I say consistent story?
Yes, you did.
I meant a consistent world or something, but yeah.
It has consistent elements. 1 through 3 are the same story. But aside from that, nothing else is. There's obviously always a Dragon Lord and a prophesied hero and all that stuff. But in Final Fantasy games, there's always a Cid and airships and Moogles and Chocobos and all that. So, well, not always. They evolved over time. But these are standard elements in them. So I think that Dragon Quest has about as much in common with Final Fantasy.
Okay, and this is probably just mostly laid on me that I don't know anything about them past the first 3 games. So there you go.
All right.
I know you're just quite disappointed that I know nothing about Dragon Quest series.
They're good games. I like both series. I prefer Final Fantasy. Just my line in the sand. Okay, on to the next part. Actually, this is not a correction. This is just my excuse to brag to you about the fact that I was taught in college by one of the co-creators of Shadowrun, Mr. Tom Dowd.
And you have mentioned this to me on several occasions, and every time you do, there's a little part of me that wants to get my hands through the screen and strangle you because it's not fair.
He's a nice guy. You might be able to contact him for the podcast. He has some cool stories.
Yeah? Oh, there's a video game. The problem is I basically spend the entire time talking pen and paper. But actually, it's probably not a bad idea. I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah, he also was the producer on several FASA games as well for the Xbox. So there's plenty to talk about with that.
Cool.
He's just a cool, nice dude. I've had several heart-to-hearts with him. We went to GDC together. It was good fun.
Oh, really? Oh. Now you're making me feel even worse. It's like, okay, yeah, we'll have to talk about it. Definitely needs to be on my list of interviews.
Yeah. All right. And then a Carl comment. You cannot read the corrections from an episode that has not aired yet. Bad, Carl.
What did I do? What did I read?
You mentioned the CinemaWare thing in this episode. Bad, Carl.
Oh. Sorry. Okay, I will try not to read the corrections ahead of time.
I need to. Everything needs to be fresh, Carl. This is how you content. How you content. All right.
Oh, there's a comment coming up. Okay, no, just kidding.
And then John was wondering who was running G4, and the answer is NBC and Dish Network were the two companies actually running that. He was saying, was it Ziff Davis? But I think Ziff Davis did at one point have a TV organization, but they were not running G4.
Gotcha.
On that note as well, Icons is definitely an entry into video game history. It is definitely they get some interesting people sometimes, but it is not at all like a thoroughly researched thing. You know, it's a Kent kind of. They have Stephen Kent on all the time on it, and then in the later seasons, you were like, why is Frank Miller on this? It's because they took the idea of icons in a very liberal direction. I mean, G4 became less and less video game focused over its runtime. So eventually it devolved into just general geek culture kind of stuff, because that would get more views than a gaming dedicated focused channel. So some Icon episodes are good. I mean, there's one with Activision. They actually got Bobby Kotick to sit down for like a whole episode to talk about Activision. Wow. A couple of them are nice, but it's real. Like, it's the style of filmmaking. It's basically I love the '80s kind of thing from VH1 and all that. I hate that style of filmmaking. Just this kind of rough, quick cuts, gags, and then like an overexcited narrator, like that stuff. So G4 Icons is worth checking out, but you're not gonna learn that much. That's what I'll say.
Gotcha. Yeah.
All right.
There were a few things like that back in the day. I remember another one where it was all these people just reacting. It was a bunch of early YouTubers. I can't remember who put it together anymore. I know an Angry Video Game Nerd and the NES
NES
Punk, were on it, and a few other people. I just can't remember the name of the show anymore. Oh, well.
All right, and last on the list, you were saying from this point, from May to 2001, that Duke Nukem Forever would come out in a decade and a half. But actually, from that point, it was a decade. 10 years.
Oh, okay. Only 10 years. Well, it's only 10 years, and still won't make it onto this show since this is only a 10-year run. So
you could keep going forward, Carl. You could redo your old episodes and just keep it in a perpetual cycle forever.
No. No. All good things must come to an end at some point, and we're closing in. Exactly. We're coming in on year 3 of 10. Okay, I'm just going to get through this run, and that's it.
Well, best of luck to you. And I will continue to be the vigilant watcher at the gates to let you know where you fall down and to help you back up.
Ethan, you are a friend doing the good deed, the very good deed, or something.
All right. Adios.
Well, first of all, I want to admire his ability to sing and how he actually sticks to it every darn time.
He does it well. Come on, you got to give him props.
He does. I mean, I'm just jealous. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I totally love it. I love it. See, this is bad. What he does is good. But then I like the fact that he points out you don't know jack about Dragon Quest.
And I must admit that my knowledge of Dragon Quest is about, in gold plating thick. That's about as much as I know about Dragon Quest.
All right, so you're shining to the outside, but on the inside, well, no one knows what's underneath.
Yeah,
So
and
you're a man of
any
mystery.
little touch is going to reveal the sad truth that I have never actually played a Dragon Quest game. So
I mean,
I'm sorry, everybody.
up to the part where you said that you haven't played any Dragon Quest game, I would say this is the fate of a teacher, isn't it?
Not the fate of a teacher. It's just fate of somebody who'd never owned a console and had better things to do with their time. Sorry.
Alrighty, and you already
So
insulted
all the Dragon Quest
half
fans
of
out
our
there,
listeners.
and you know who you are. I'm sorry.
You know who you are and what you did.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have some amongst the patrons, so it's. I'm sorry, guys. I have not played a Dragon Quest game. It's one of the holes in my gaming education. I mean, a couple of years ago, I actually sat down and played through a Final Fantasy game just so I could say I've played through a Final Fantasy game. And maybe I'll have to do that with a Dragon Quest game at some point. Maybe one of our patrons can recommend which one, if I'm only going to play one, which one I should play.
Give me a second. The last time we talked about that you have some spare time and you are able to play some games.
Yes.
Did you actually get any recommendations?
None whatsoever, and I'm quite thankful for that. Because if I don't get any recommendations, I don't have to take any recommendations seriously. But we will see if that evolves at all. Remember, everybody,
Guys, don't let me down.
all the links are in the show notes below. And if you want to see the amazingly wonderful video of Peter playing Serious Sam, or any of the other 7 Minute in Heaven videos, they're all up on our Patreon, so you can become a Patreon supporter, or send us an email if you want to interact with us at videoGameNewsroomTimeMachine@gmail.com. Link in the show notes below. Much easier to click on the link than trying to type that all in. And also the Twitters and the Instagrams and all that fun stuff where you can also find us. And not least of all, remember that our standard disclaimer when we turn on the time machine that all the news is coming from magazines and newspapers with cover dates of June of 2001, which obviously means that the events happened at some point before that. Mm-hmm. So, think I've covered all the bases. Can we turn on the time machine?
Let's turn on the time machine.
Perfect. We're turning on the time machine and heading back 20 years to June of 2001.
Nintendo's GameCube system.
We're unveiling the Xbox. 2001. Graphics is a computer game.
Welcome to June of 2001. Peter, what's our first headline?
Saudis ban Pokemon.
The Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia has issued a ban on the series for promoting evolution, polytheism, and any other thing you can think of. The ban would be repeated in several Muslim countries, and restrictions on the show and games continue to this day.
I'm just thinking of the Pokemon story, and I wonder where the heck is their polytheism? Evolution, yes, but polytheism?
Well, you end up with a Pokemon god in the first Pokemon movie.
With Mewtwo?
Yeah, he's a Pokemon god.
No, he's not a Pokemon god. Mewtwo is a failed genetic experiment. Well,
but he's supposed to be a Pokemon god. He's supposed to be the top one. And there's also references to deities. You have temples that they visit at different points in the thing. And then you also have, I believe, a reference or two to a church. So you end up with a whole mess of religious symbolism in there. Then ghosts. and things like that. So you can't get away from it.
True that, Ghosts.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe the Grand Mufti just didn't get them all. I don't know.
Or he didn't have any of them, or he wanted none of it, so to speak.
I think the latter one is right. He
Yeah.
just didn't. I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, and then you also have Stars of David showing up from time to time, and crosses, and et cetera, et cetera. It's just, that was just not going to pass muster in Saudi Arabia.
Do you know whether under MBS Pokemon is allowed in Saudi Arabia today?
Under MBS?
Mubarak bin Salman, the
Oh,
Prince.
no. As far from what I was able to read, it's still banned with a couple of exceptions. There's, I think you can watch the television show over certain satellite receivers. It's no longer banned in that sense, but for the most part, it's still basically not allowed. Yeah.
So no Pokemon Go in Saudi Arabia. Okay, people stay at home. I mean, it's too hot anyway, so.
There you go. Why do you want to go outside anyway?
Exactly. And before we play the racist card, let's go to the next topic. Nintendo tries to discourage Xbox pre-sales.
In a letter to retailers, Nintendo has tried to discourage them from featuring Xbox promotional materials in their stores and instead concentrate on existing product.
Wait, we're talking 2001, and Nintendo is writing a letter to retailers telling them, hey guys, don't promote Xbox.
Well, the idea is this. The Xbox hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
And everybody's expecting it by the end of the year. But this letter actually went out in, I want to say, January or February. So at that point, Microsoft had not yet announced a launch date. Then nobody was sure if it was even going to be able to materialize this year. And there was all of this promotional material that, Microsoft is paying for it to be displayed in the stores. And at the same time, the market had taken a pretty serious dip in 2000. In 2000, the video game market as a whole had dropped about 5% in revenue. And that's pretty significant.
Okay, that's
well, but it was because it was a transition period. The PlayStation 2 had come out in North America, but didn't really have any killer apps. The N64 is already ancient. The Dreamcast was dying. And the PlayStation 1, still had some games coming out for it, but obviously at that point it's already 5-year-old tech. And so the idea here really was, or what Nintendo is trying to promote is the idea that you guys should not be concentrating on this system that may or may not show up from a company that has no track record in the business. And all it's doing is really diverting dollars away from people saying, well, I'll buy whatever's on the shelf. And instead now they're saying, oh, look at this shiny new thing that's coming. I won't buy it now, anything now. I'll save my money for later. And you could say that it's either a very cynical ploy by Nintendo, and it got a link to the actual letter in the show notes below. But it's either a very cynical attempt by Nintendo to try to get the stores on their side, or it's just the facing of the reality that the retailers are making almost all their money at Christmas anyway. And they see the money that Microsoft can pull and throw behind a machine, and they're basically just saying, you know what? We're not going to be selling that much software after Christmas anyway. Might as well take Microsoft's money right now to put up the flyers and then hope that it pays off big around Christmas time when they finally launch the Xbox.
I mean, the Xbox was not that big of a success, so...
Well, I mean, it wasn't as big as the PlayStation, but it was still... I mean, it still sold well.
Yeah,
it didn't have the massive third-party support that the PlayStation got. It didn't have as many big first-person titles as a Nintendo console normally would bring in. But at the same time, it did sell, especially in North America, sold well enough with games like Halo to attract a pretty big following, which is why the 360 outperformed the PS3 in North America. And,
of course. I mean, Halo was a people's magnet.
Well, of course. And it also had to do with the fact that you could now play it online, that there was a changing marketplace for the games, and it had 4 controller ports. You could play 4-player split screen, which meant, more controllers sold, which probably also didn't hurt the retail outlet. I'm sure it wasn't like a major cash cow, but the Xbox was a decent selling machine, and Microsoft could afford to support it so that the machine, when it comes out, is, I can't remember if it was the same price as the PlayStation 2 at that point or just slightly more expensive. But, I mean, you were getting a lot more hardware than the PlayStation 2 was offering. You had, the Ethernet ports, you had the hard drive built in, you had a more powerful graphics processor. It was a big, huge piece of kit, and it should have been going for much more, but Microsoft was subsidizing it, which made it an interesting prospect for the retailers.
Yeah. I mean, Microsoft wanted to get in the market. They had way more than enough money with thanks to their Windows and Office systems and whatnot. So sure, why not? I mean, up to this day, they're subsidizing their consoles. And at the beginning of a console cycle, I think only Nintendo is the one who wants to make any earnings based on the console.
Well, yes. I mean, Nintendo wasn't the first one to do that. Everybody before Nintendo was making money on that.
I'm not saying Nintendo is the first one. Nintendo is the one remaining wants to make any earnings on the consoles. I think Xbox and also PlayStation, they're subsidizing.
Sony, in the first years. In the early years.
In the first years, exactly.
Later on, no, but we talked about it last month already in the 20-year jump that Microsoft, it's going to be a long time. It's going to be many, many years before the Xbox division actually turns a profit. Oh, yeah. And it turns a profit today without a problem. It's just they had to buy their way into the market. And so, yeah, this letter, there's quite a few articles from this era from different publications, a lot of online chatter about it. And like I said, I've got a link in the show notes to both a copy of the letter as well as an interview with one of the marketing people at Nintendo about it. And I mean, I understand their argument, but at the same time, it just comes off as so cynical. To be like, this company that has never even been in the games business, what do they know about it? And at the time they're writing that, nobody could tell whether or not the GameCube was going to be replaced or if the GameCube was going to come out that year. The GameCube could very well have been pushed back another year. Yeah. And the idea that, you should be promoting the games for the N64. N64 at this point in North America only has a trickle of games planned for the rest of the year. So there isn't really that much for them to promote, period, on the N64. The only other system that really could get the promotion is the PlayStation 2, and it's still missing anything even remotely close to a killer app.
Yeah. Yeah, true that. And also for me, to me it seems a little bit desperate what Nintendo did.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of funny because 10 years earlier, and we saw that in the last few 30-year jumps, Nintendo is still, the king of the world, the ones being investigated for monopolistic practices.
Yeah.
I mean, they could just kill companies with a stare. And it's like, dude, you guys aren't that player anymore. The N64 is not that system any longer. And yeah, it's just kind of, I think it almost reading the letter, it almost felt like somebody at Nintendo is not quite understanding that they're not in the position they once were.
Yeah. Or maybe they were just afraid that another juggernaut enters the field. No, I mean, Microsoft, although being new to the console market, I mean, they are, even back then, they were huge.
Yeah, and they're not new to software development. They weren't new to hardware in that sense. I mean, they'd already been making game controllers and stuff for quite a while. And if anybody was going to have the chops to create a software platform, well, it's kind of what they do. I mean, and we'll be talking much more about that in our next 40-year jump, but now I'm getting ahead of myself. So, okay, enough about this fun story. We have plenty more to cover.
Oh, yeah. EA shutters Ultima Online 2.
The long in development UO2, which would have reinvented the game in 3D, changed virtually all of the game mechanics and settings, and would have been heralded by the closure of the original UO, has been cancelled with all 80 staff members laid off. A ceremonial wake was held where design documents were burned. Richard Garriott himself joined the festivities. Oh, and EA had a huge job booth at GDC, advertising prominently for people to work on online projects while also shutting down Jane's CombatNet service. EA.com is the big effort being pushed in the online space. You may hear more about this in the second part of our interview with Gordon Walton coming next week. Shameless plug,
Okay, so please take this story, spoon-feed it to me a little bit, because I'm not getting the gravity of it.
Okay, so Ultima Online is not the first MMORPG, but you could very well make an argument that it's the first one that really makes it a mainstream piece of entertainment. It's the first one that has a big, massive number of paying subscribers. It's the first one that really gets people excited about the prospect of MMORPGs.
Okay.
And EA didn't quite understand what they had, didn't quite understand. And a lot of this is what I'm saying here is based off of my interview with Gordon Walton. Like I said, second part of it is coming out next week, so the week after this interview. It's not going up first for the Patreons because Gordon just launched. We're recording this on the 9th of July, but just this week, his new game Crowfall finally launched, which is also an MMO. So that's why we're launching this directly onto the normal feed to sort of celebrate that and piggyback a little bit. So the idea here is they were going to shut down UO and at the same time launch UO2. But UO2 wasn't going to focus on the world building and the ability to, have the freedom to do whatever you wanted in the game like UO did. It was going to be more combat heavy. It was going to be using a full 3D engine, which at the time also meant a lot of compromises on the stuff that you could do in the game. especially the customization factors and stuff of the characters, because when you're dealing with 2D sprites, that's a little bit easier. And basically, it would have been a completely different experience. It would have totally pissed off the UO fans, who are at this point were already kind of famous for doing things like stalking developers if changes were made that they didn't like, sending death threats, if things didn't work the way they were supposed to in the game. We've had stories in the past here on the show about people becoming aides to the game and getting paid or not getting paid and then wanting to get paid and blah, blah, blah. The entire idea of people spending an enormous chunk of their lives inside the game was not understood by the developers, definitely not understood by the publishers at the time UO launched. And this UO2 project, which had already been in development for several years, and according to Gordon, wasn't really ready for prime time, and if it had been, it would have been a disaster because it would have pissed off the original UO people, or they would have had to keep both of them running simultaneously, which is what EverQuest did later on. So EverQuest 1 and EverQuest 2 are still running to this day. But the shutting of down of UO2 is a bit of a turning point because it shows that these persistent MMO worlds, even if the tech is not great, they have an inherent value in their communities that is unlike other video game products, where if you tried to sell somebody today a game that's running on a game engine that's 20 plus years old, they'd be looking at you like, really? Seriously? Full price? Or you want me to really spend 20 hours a week on this? But once you have the persistent worlds, the graphics don't matter. The game engine can be clunky. The people are there for that community. And this is that moment when they realize, you know what, we've got to shutter this because what we have, we cannot disturb. And we just talked shortly before this about Third Dawn, which was the slight repepping of the original engine where the sprites were replaced with 3D models. But even to this day, and they're still running UO, they have to upgrade both systems. There has to be both. For every new creature that they create or every new character model that they build, they have to do both the 2D pre-rendered and the 3D real-time version, because you still have players who want to play the original version, and you can't just shut it down because these people will not go for it.
Oh, Lord. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And this is going to lead to another fiasco inside of EA, which is EA.com, which is going to be their attempt to piggyback on the .com boom as a web portal. And unfortunately, they're coming into it just at the moment when all of these are collapsing. We've got another story like that also on the calendar for today. This is going to be a huge disaster. I mean, ultimately, they're going to sort of figure it out with Origins, but it's going to be a while.
Oh, man, I remember back in the day when I installed a game from EA, and there's always, after the installation routine, there's always this pop-up window like register your game at EA.com.
Yeah.
Why the hell?
Well, and this is one of those things where they were trying to figure out what they could do with the web, how the web was going to add value. And again, this is something Gordon goes into unbelievably well in the interview. How they're trying to fit this new technology, this new platform into the box game a business model. and they just couldn't get away from the box game business model. And that's really where this goes. Like I said, next week, guys, listen to that interview. It's an extra long one. Haven't finished editing it, but it's going to be like 2.5 hours plus. But it's so good because it really is an insider's view of how these companies made the decisions that they made at the time, and what some of those repercussions were, what the effects of it were. Some of the deals that almost happened are absolutely phenomenal. So I gotta say, it's one of the interviews. I mean, I've done a lot of really cool interviews so far, but this is one that really excited me. So, and EA is not the only one having problems with this stuff right now. The whole online thing or layoffs at companies are taking off all over the place right now. Remember, we just had a drop of 5% in sales last year, which is also having an effect on all of this. But a whole bunch of developers at Interplay were laid off after Fallout Tactics shipped. So they shipped the product and they immediately laid off the team. But Interplay is also one of these companies that's collapsing. This is why Fallout 3 is not going to be an Interplay game at the end of the day because, well, they won't really be around anymore. And the same thing happened over at Sierra because they're collapsing right after Tribes 2 shipped. They laid off the entire team or almost the entire team, and that was basically the end of Dynamics, my favorite developer of all time. So, yeah, the market is going through a lot of weird moments of they're laying the teams off, but then hiring new people for new projects instead of just moving them over. Go figure.
Oh well. New brooms and stuff.
Yeah. It's everything must start anew.
Oh yeah.
That's the transition for the next.
Yeah. Or to Dark Souls. Anyhow, Garage Games wants to rev up the engines of creativity.
Garage Games, a company founded by former Dynamics developers, including founder Jeff Tunnell, has continued to expand on the Tribes 2 engine and has now released it as version 12 with minimal licensing fees. Oh, sorry, V12. With minimal licensing fees to enable creative game designers on a budget. The engine would later be known as Torque and be released for free in 2012 and is still in use for a variety of applications to this day.
I mean, this truly is a big help. I mean, all those licensing fees to get use the engines, I think those were prohibitive for some developers.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you look at what engines were costing at the time, it wasn't one of those situations where people would be like, oh, I'll just pick up an engine and that'll be the core of my new game. You really had to pop down some serious cash at this point. And having the tools available at a reasonable price just was going to hopefully, especially with digital distribution, and this is kind of the idea that's one of the ideas that's underpinning Garage Games is not only that you'll be able to develop games on the cheap, but because of the internet, you don't have to be developing full price box titles that have to go into a electronics boutique. You're going to be able to distribute them online, and that's going to make everything better. Obviously, the online distribution model, again, we've got another story a little bit later in the show about that, is going to be hitting a wall because the idea of secure online payments hasn't 100% been worked out yet. People are still a little iffy about putting their credit card numbers online. And second, the download speeds are not quite where they need to be yet to make it accessible to download a full game onto a person's hard drive.
Yeah. Just a quick question. What was the business model of Garage Games? I mean, when they are basically waiving the licensing fee for a engine they developed. Oh.
Well, they're making their own games. They're also making games. And they're not waiving it completely. It's just a minimal licensing fee. So they're basically like saying, hey, you don't need to, the latest id one, let's say, cost you $1 million to license. We'll give you one for $15,000 or whatever. And I think what they're trying to do is they're making the tools anyway for themselves, and they don't see the people who are licensing their tool as direct competition for their own productions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. Paul Neurath forms Floodgate Entertainment.
Rising from the fall of Looking Glass Entertainment, as we talked about in our August 2000 jump, co-founder Paul Neurath has started Floodgate Entertainment, a company with a very interesting gaming legacy that we will be exploring soon in the interview I recorded with Paul a few months back. And
First of all, yeah.
Sorry. Go for it.
No, I just wanted to admire this guy for. I mean, where does he get his names from? Looking Glass Entertainment, Floodgate Entertainment.
Well, the guy is extremely creative. It is some interesting ideas, and like I said, I interviewed him all the way back in January. And I still haven't gotten to posting that interview for the patrons, but I believe it's the next one in the queue. So that'll be our interview for August. And for the patrons. And then 3 months later, everybody else will get it on the normal feed. So, if you want this early, shameless plug here. But so Floodgate Entertainment is going to produce a few very interesting games. Some of the stuff is going to be, how do I put it nicely? It's going to be not necessarily the stuff that's going to change the world, but he does do quite a bit of innovative stuff. And there's going to be some talent coming out of Floodgate that's also going to be doing other stuff. And it's not going to be the last company that Paul works at. So in some ways, it's like an in-between. In other ways, it's an interesting stepping stone, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it does. But I mean, you don't always have to reinvent the wheel in order to make good games.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And the fun thing is, again, it tells the story. He gets some very interesting experience about working on very different platforms. And he ends up doing Pocket PC games. He's working with other people's engines and other people's IPs a lot, and it really does come off as an interesting experience because he's working on mobile phones at this point and stuff, so it really does broaden his horizon as far as business models and so forth. Like I said, it'll all come out in the interview later on. I don't want to spoil too much now.
All right.
He's a big name and doing something new.
Okay, and I'm looking forward to listening to the interview. In the meantime, Sid Meier teams up with Maxis.
Maxis, makers of all things sim-related, and Sid Meier, maker of all things Sid Meier-related, are teaming up. The game that would emerge is Sid Meier's Sim Golf, a golf course management game.
I don't even know how to respond to that. I mean, golf surely has its fan base, and it's surely a big game, But, you have Maxis, the guys with the Sims franchise, and you have Sid Meier, the guy with the I Simulate Everything for You franchise. Hey, let's do golf.
Well, not just golf. They're doing the golf course management.
Even worse.
The game is actually more of a business simulation where you have to also build the golf courses and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Like mini golf?
No, real golf.
Oh, real golf.
Serious golf.
So you're basically painting an entire area green, put in some holes, and put down some balls. Jeez! Where did this go?
I mean, you have to... Okay, remember, Maxis is also the company that gave us Sim Earth and Sim Ant.
Yeah.
Okay.
And SimCity. Well, did they give us SimCity?
They gave us SimCity.
And they gave us SimCity?
Yeah. Well, Maxis, I believe, comes in later. Or did Maxis already exist at the time SimCity? I can't remember the timeline. If Maxis comes in after SimCity or before, it doesn't really matter. But
this is surely a point for the Department of Corrections. Just say something,
yes,
Ethan will get it right.
This is true. So the idea here is these two big names came together. Now remember, Sid Meier at this point is doing his own thing. He's got his own company. And I mean, it just makes sense to try to combine the licensing and the names and see what comes out. Maxis is owned by EA at this point, so it can't hurt.
No.
And I mean, it's a one and done. There's no big sequels or anything coming out of this, but it's just, I haven't played the game, but looking at the screenshots and reading the reviews, it really does feel like one of these little Sid Meier thought experiments.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those are absolutely amazing. And so this just was, a fun little game that got decent reviews, not great, but decent reviews at the time, and didn't hurt anybody, so why not?
Nobody was hurt during this golf course. Okay. But people get hurt in the Harry Potter franchise, and the Harry Potter mania is on the horizon. I desperately needed a transition.
Yeah. I mean, you could have been like, going from great names to, no, that doesn't work. From the realism of a golf course simulator to, I got nothing. Okay.
See, difficult.
It's not that easy. GamePro magazine leads with a huge preview of the ambitious yearly multi-platform release schedule for the Harry Potter games and movies. Could this be the TMNT of the 2000s?
It's hard for me to judge that because I was the target group of those games, and at least the first three, I totally fell for them. I loved them, and I like them up to this day. And yes, they are flawed, of course, but it's nostalgia. Starting from the fourth Harry Potter game, however, this is an entire different topic. I mean, they're just god awful.
Well, I mean, I can't judge the quality of any of the titles because I've never actually played any of them. Mm-hmm. But, and this is very important, nobody had ever tried to do a yearly release schedule for a non-sports game.
Right, Assassin's Creed wasn't revealed yet.
Yeah, and even Assassin's Creed gave up on that after a while.
Yeah,
because
10 years or so.
No, they only did the yearly thing for like maybe 5 years or so, and then realized they couldn't keep up the quality. But the idea here really is that to keep up the schedule with the movies.
Yeah.
And this is one of those moments where, in the past we had always had movie tie-in licensed games, but you usually waited for the VHS release.
Yeah.
Or the DVD release. the idea of having it all out at the same time to have that multimedia blitz. And we talked about the original fight over the Harry Potter license a year or two ago, when the stories were breaking that Nintendo was trying to buy the license or whatnot, and then Warner Brothers got it, and they've now sold off the game rights to EA. Mm-hmm. Just the idea of doing it all in one, it's so ambitious that the fact that any of it worked is amazing.
Yeah.
So, but working with licenses can be tough.
It can be tough, and I am sure Vivendi, and thanks for setting this up, Vivendi will get to, we'll learn this because Vivendi gets the Tolkien license. But
not the movie license. So, just remember, we're setting the stage. 2001, we get the first movie in the Lord of the Rings series. Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring is coming out Christmas of 2001. Well, Vivendi has just announced they've got the Tolkien license. Yeah. So Vivendi's subsidiary Sierra has secured the rights to the literary works of J.R.R. Tolkien. This license will run parallel to the movie license and produce a variety of, at best, mediocre games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I actually played the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring game. Well,
really?
I started it, but maybe I was too young by then. Maybe it was because it wasn't like the movies, because I haven't read the book back then.
Maybe it was just because it was bad.
And maybe that. I just didn't want to assume this from the get-go because I really, for the heck of it, I can't remember how it was. However, I think I never really left the Shire. I always stopped playing this game before that. Oh, right, because I had troubles with getting away from the Black Rider. So,
okay.
Just not good enough for me.
No, well, I mean, the game sucked. And their Hobbit game also sucked. And they had a couple of other titles, but the problem really was that they had to avoid making it look too much like the movies, and they just did not have the resources or the teams to make good games out of this license at this point. Yeah, and they were trying to piggyback on the movies without being the movie games. And they got lucky at the beginning because EA started late and didn't actually get their first game out until the second movie. That's why the first EA game is The Two Towers and not Fellowship of the Rings.
Yeah, I've just played the Return of the King game. It was basically just butchering your way through the level.
Yeah, and that's what Two Towers was too.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a straight-up action game. If I remember correctly, Don Daglow worked on those, or at least on one of them, with his company. And in our interview, he talked about it, or maybe he did it off the record. I can't remember now. But he talked about how it was a very rushed job. They needed, Stormfront Studios developed the game, exactly. And he said, they basically had to get it done as quickly as possible because EA got the license for the movies in the very last second. And then it was like, okay, we have how much time to do this? And this is why there was also no game for the first movie because they just didn't have the time to do it.
Oh, well, the fate of movie licensed games. Things that took a little bit more time to prepare and lived way longer. Windows XP is coming.
PC Player Magazine has a preview of the soon-to-be-released Windows XP. The new OS will replace the failed Windows ME and, unlike the Windows 9X series of OSs, have a true 32-bit non-DOS-based kernel.
Oh man, I actually made the transition from Windows ME to XP.
Yeah, me too.
And
me too.
ME was just a bugfest. I mean, it crashed so often.
I remember I actually thought all computers had to crash every 2 hours. That was just I had convinced myself that you could not play a game on a PC without it crashing every 2 hours. That's just how it works, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what life under ME was like. Oh my God, it was terrible. But then came XP, and all was good in the world.
Oh yeah, and then there was Vista. And then there was 8.
That's true.
No, there was 7 before. Sorry. I have the feeling like Microsoft always has a good OS, bad OS, good OS, bad OS. I think Windows 11 will be a bad OS, and Windows 12 will be a salvation for everyone suffering under Windows 11.
I when they announced that the start button was going to be in the middle, I was like, that better be readjustable, because I have now spent...
Really?
Of course, because I've spent 25 years of my life never having to look at the screen when I want the start button. I
just heard that they announced that this. I just heard from you that they announced that the start button is in the middle, and I damn sure hope they make it adjustable.
Yeah, because I have spent 25 years of my life simply the mouse. I don't look at the mouse cursor; it just goes down to the bottom corner, and I hit the button. Now I'm supposed to hit it as one. No, I'm sorry. That crap might work on a tablet, but it ain't.
We're too old for that crap. We're not adaptable anymore. We're just too old. Think of us old man.
It's a practicality issue. There's a reason it was in the corner to begin with, and there's a reason why the Mac sucks. So, okay, and I said it. The Mac sucks because the Mac does that
yet again.
Yet again.
I mean,
I stand true to my principles.
Yes, but you should consider that at least.
As God is my witness, I shall never go Mac again, or something.
Go for it, but you should consider that at least twice a year we lose all the Mac listeners. Twice a year.
Yeah.
You know, we're gonna do the same what Infogrames did, because Infogrames posts losses.
Infogram has increased its revenue by 26%, but the losses don't seem to want to stop. After a loss of over $80 million in the first half of 2000, they have now posted a loss of $20.7 million for the first half of 2001. The blame, they say, lies with insufficient hardware units of new consoles hitting the market.
Well, of course.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, if you bet big on PlayStation 2 and there's a bottleneck in PlayStation 2 deliveries, that's going to hit your bottom line hard, because those new games cost a lot of money to develop.
Oh, yeah.
And
the fate of all PS5 and Xbox Series X developers.
Exactly. Every new generation costs a butt-ton to learn to develop for, and increased graphic and sound budgets. But their recently acquired Hasbro Interactive unit will also cost them an additional $20 million to turn around, according to CEO Bonnell. So,
well, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it for the last 2 years on the show, how Infogram has been on this massive purchasing spree, buying companies and so forth, without really any clear vision of how to incorporate them all together and make them a sound financial whole. Mm-hmm. Well, now they've turned it into a financial whole, all right, but not a financial whole with a W. And so these losses aren't as bad as they were. There's more revenue coming in, mainly because they keep buying more companies. But it's going to be a hard slog for them to figure out a way to actually consolidate and start producing products that are going to do well in the market.
Yeah. Oh, well. I mean, they're just sitting on an excess of liquidity, and they're just banning it left and right.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Speaking about people speaking of people who no longer have liquidity.
Exactly. Freeloader.com falls prey to the .com bust.
PC Zone magazine reports on a slew of game-related websites that are either shutting down or on the way out due to the collapse of the online ad revenue market. Freeloader.com, which we reported on during our April 2000 jump, has had to take down all of its commercial games and replace them with browser games as they try to regroup.
And as we know, browser games always attract customers. Always.
Not always. They do, but not always. So just as a reminder, freeloader.com was this website where you could actually download slightly older commercial titles. GTA, the original GTA, was the big draw. And you could download it for free and play it on your computer. And they were financing this whole thing with ads on the website, as well as I believe they were adding also ads as you played the game. So there was like a little ad banner on the side or on the bottom or something. And so you saw the ad while you were playing the game, and the ad revenue was supposed to be financing the licensing of the games. Well, the .com bubble has now burst by 2001. The ad revenue is no longer pouring in. The value of ads on websites has just plummeted to almost nothing. And freeloader.com simply doesn't have enough money to pay for it. Going through some of their older entries on archive.org, so using the Wayback Machine to see what the website looked like at different points, there were notices later in 2001 where they're saying, well, you know, GTA will be back soon, GTA will be back soon, while everything on the page had just turned into cheap little browser games. And the company doesn't really recover. At some point, I believe in 2002, the website just goes dead.
Oh well, at least we almost end with those topics that I want to end with. Also, those were weird times. I mean, there's the internet. We don't know what to do with it. Let's just make some money. Of course, it won't work.
Yeah, I mean, everybody thought ad revenue was going to be the panacea that made everything possible on the internet. And unfortunately, the people paying for ad revenue were just other websites trying to make money off of ad revenue. And it just turned into, you know, the snake eating its own tail. At some point, somebody needed to generate some actual cash from an actual product in order to keep paying those astronomical ad prices. It's the question of the cost of customer acquisition was just getting higher and higher and higher because people were becoming immune to the ads. They weren't just clicking on them like lemmings like they did in the mid-90s.
Yes, of course. Well, it's like with contracts nowadays. No one pays attention to them anymore.
Nobody
During
ever
the time
did.
of cookie warnings. Well, yeah, of course. But today I think it's gotten way worse. But anyhow, I don't want to start this discussion now and rather move to the next topic because I start to lose my voice for some reason. FASA ceases. Yeah, but still. FASA ceases operations.
FASA. Okay. The makers of pen and paper games such as BattleTech and Shadowrun has been shuttered. The company, whose FASA Interactive division was bought up by Microsoft as we reported on back in our February 1999 jump, has decided to cease operations while still solvent and is still in existence to this day as a rights management company. Company co-founder Jordan Weissman has founded WizKids and licensed out BattleTech and Crimson Skies to further develop those lines, while Shadowrun has gone to Fantasy Productions.
Couldn't you have just like switched those two topics? I mean, this is an almost dead of a company, and freeloader.com really went down.
FASA's the more interesting company. The fact that it still theoretically exists, but the FASA Corporation, where you were getting all these RPGs coming out of one big house that had a certain amount of synergy about it, that is no longer there, that the FASA name is no longer on these products that, especially me as a Shadowrun kid, no longer seeing FASA on the covers of the books really kind of hit me a little hard, because there was TSR in my world, and then there was FASA. And FASA was always like the cool kid, as opposed to TSR, the D&D makers, where it was like, okay, it's your mom and pop's role-playing games, but these guys, these are the badasses. And losing that company name, losing that legacy, is kind of blows.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what else kind of blows?
What?
We're done for this episode.
That's true. We have reached the end. We have companies going broke. We have seen all the news that was worth talking about from 20 years ago. And that leaves us only with one task. Peter, what is the word of the episode?
I think last time we did something uplifting, didn't we?
Yeah.
I think we talked a lot about cash this episode, so let's take solvency as word of the episode.
Solvency. I dig it. So, solvency is the word of the episode, kids. Remember that. Now, remember, you can also get in touch with us through all of the socials. Send us messages. We'd love to chat. And support us on Patreon.
Yes, and please tell Carl what to play, and please put choose something super ridiculous, because I want to see a 10 minutes in hell.
We can see about that, and also remember to hit the subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube, or subscribe in your podcast apps, and tell your friends. I mean, if you're on the social medias, tell them how much you enjoy this show. Don't just like it, retweet.
Love it.
Or whatever the kids are doing these days. Retweet. It still sounds like, some kind of weird sex act, but okay. And with that being said, bye.
Bye.